There is no doubt that sound is essential to any film, be it music, dialogue or effects. Sound gives the film an atmosphere, a sense of tension. Music helps with the emotion. Even during the silent film era, sound was used to help with the storytelling. In some theatres, this may have been a man called a raconteur who narrated the intertitles for those who could not read, as well as create some of the sound effects. But every theatre had to have a musician. They were essential, as they would play the music attached to the film, written specifically by the studios. Most commonly, this would be done by a piano, though in some small towns in America, a guitarist was used instead. For the larger, more luxurious theatres, a small orchestra would be used, with the drummer timing in the sound effects using his kit. The whole experience was designed to give the audience a vibrant and energetic feel to the movie. The history of sound is quite complex and involved, so instead of going over it in this essay, I have attached a timeline with its own notes that can be seen separately. For the modern age, we tend to take sound for granted, not realising that without it, the scene would be meaningless. For example, here's the famous training scene from the 1976 film Rocky that inadvertently immortalised the montage for 80s cinema. Now let's see it again, but this time without the music. Suddenly it's no longer the emotional achievement of a down-and-out boxer, but an ordinary runner with an over-enthusiastic reaction to running up some steps. We've lost the contents of the scene. Here's a different example of when you've replaced the music entirely, changing the genre from horror to rom-com.
Foster father. I'd do anything.
Climbing up on Salisbury Hill,
I love it.
I could see the city light. My heart going boom, boom, boom. Son, he said, grab your things, I've come.
But it's not just music that gives the film its heart. Sound effects are just as important. In some films, they literally become their own characters. Combined, these elements invest the audience directly into the film. Over the years, sound in the film industry evolved with music, dialogue and ADR. Sound studios captured extensive libraries of everyday sounds that could be used for effects and Foley. But for films that required unusual sounds, sound technicians had to find ingenious ways to incorporate different sounds to create new ones. Ben Burtt, a young graduate from USC and a projectionist, became a legend in cinema history when he was employed in 1975 to create a few unique sound effects for a small unknown film. What started out as a request for the sound of an alien creature called a Wookiee quickly became a huge list of hardware, including laser guns, laser swords, land speeders, spaceships, control rooms, and even a Death Star, to name just a few. Basically, he had to create an entire universe of sound, including alien languages. All of these sounds had to be unique, and so Ben found himself having to design new sounds from the ground up, purely by experimenting. Although his initial job was to vocalize a Wookiee, Ben was fascinated by the laser sword, now known as a lightsaber. Just by seeing Ralph McQuarrie's concept painting of a saber battle, Ben knew what kind of sound he wanted. He could hear it in his head. He just had to recreate that sound. This involved his other job as a projectionist. The theatre he had worked at had a very old simplex projector that had an electronic interlocking motor that hummed as it sat idle. This hum would slowly change pitch and form beats, perfect for the lightsaber. Ben knew that he needed something else, something to add danger to it, a sparkling sound. This effect was found later on by pure accident. During a recording session, Ben noted that a broken wire on one of his microphones reacted to the picture tube of an old television set, creating a buzz and sputter. Combining it with his recording of a projector, Ben found the basic sound of the lightsaber. Finally, he had to find a way to move the sound, to make this lightsaber slice through the air. This bit was surprisingly easy. With the combined sounds playing through a loudspeaker, Ben could then watch the battle on a screen and mimic the movements with a microphone, swinging it past the speaker, creating a Doppler effect. The lightsaber was born and now has become an iconic sound in modern pop culture. Personally, I have a particular fondness for the Millennium Falcon. Not just because of the look. I remember as a kid sitting in the cinema watching the Falcon blast its way out of the Mos Eisley spaceport. and immediately fell in love with the sound of its engine. It was something I'd never heard before in a spaceship. It felt real, it felt really powerful. Ben knew that the universe of Star Wars had to sound lived in, and that included the vehicles. Although he had already recorded jet engines, he knew they weren't quite the right sound for the Falcon. Instead, he decided to look back in time to the old piston-driven World War II airplanes. Capturing the planes as they raced by at air races, Ben was able to slow down the audio recording, transforming the high-pitched motor elements into a really energetic and powerful sound. Essentially, the Millennium Falcon was a P-51 Mustang airplane. Then, to add an extra kick, as the Falcon flew past a set camera, Ben would put in a thunderclap. Ben Burtt used stretched electronic cables and a spanner to create the sound of a blaster. Obviously, we don't have that effect around here, we don't have those stretched cables. So instead, we've found that we can use a metal slinky by getting a standard microphone, shoving it in about a third of the way through, and a colleague holding the top of the thing, using an 8.6 audio recorder. We then lift the bottom part of the slinky and just drop it, but catch it as it gets to the bottom because you don't want to reverb. There's our blaster. Ben Burtt revolutionized the way sound effects could be created and became the world's first recognized sound designer, winning an Academy Award for his groundbreaking work. Then, in 1982, a new film would come out that would integrate its music and sounds into the heart of the movie, revolutionizing the new way of enhancing the storytelling for the viewing audience. Blade Runner's subtle use of diegetic sounds to create a living, breathing environment of a future Los Angeles was revelatory for its time. Multilingual advertisements were heard everywhere, along with a booming voice coming down from the sky, all helping to create an overcrowded yet wet metropolis. On top of that, Vangelis' iconic score was more than a score. It was an indispensable element of the movie, because it played a different role. Ivan Pushak, aka the Nerdwriter, states that the music of Blade Runner plays a different role. The score isn't laid on top of the visuals, it's not even a guide or an addition. The music is sort of baked into the DNA of the movie itself. All the audio that you hear, including score, sound design, and dialogue, is tightly integrated, each blurring into the other. It is this integration that sets Blade Runner apart from other science fiction films at the time. When Deckard first meets Rachel, the elements of the score is played in such a way that it could easily be mistaken as both diegetic and non-diegetic sounds. Is that music, or a wind chime catching the light across the wall? Those soft computer sounds could imply that there are machines in the background. Or is it also part of the score? All these sounds help create a dreamlike environment for the viewer. Even the dialogue is given a reverb effect, enhancing the feel of a large open space.
It seems you feel our work is not a benefit to the public.
Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard.
In fact, reverberation, a relatively new process to music in 1982, was key to the sound of Blade Runner. Vangelis was a maestro in this field and used it heavily in the score to create a unique atmosphere. According to film writer Andrew Stiller, heavy reverb implies a huge, enclosed, hard surface space and creates a mood of mystery and paranoia. It was perfect for this film. Interestingly, Vangelis wrote part of the score live on his Yamaha CS80 as he watched the freshly edited clips in his studio and using only his own emotions to drive the music. Knowing this only makes some of these scenes even more evocative. This one has to be my favourite scene in the film.
All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain. Time to die.
Although the film is now considered a cult classic, at the time the film flopped in the test theatres and required extensive changes, including the controversial voiceover by Harrison Ford.
The charmer's name was Gaff. I'd seen him around.
Just by adding this element, the studio managed to completely change the impact of the film, almost dumbing it down for the audience. It also didn't help that Harrison Ford, who disagreed with the voiceover, decided to read it badly, hoping that the studio would revert it to the original cut. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be until 1991 that the audiences finally got to see the original cut that Ridley Scott had initially edited. So, what kind of sounds are we hoping to employ in our film Grief? How are we going to use dialogue and music? And how important will the diegetic and non-diegetic sounds be? During this essay I wanted to look at how we could design new sounds for items that didn't exist. Could we make our own sounds for Grief instead of relying on sound libraries? I suppose this will ultimately depend on time and money, but having tried some of these experiments, I can see how some simple items can create the most unique sounds. But to be realistic, Grief won't require too many sound effects that can't be recorded on set or on Foley, similar to some of the sequences I recorded for my earlier 2008 film, Child of Alakea. But primarily, it was Blade Runner that most interested me. During our discussions and writing the script, we had always envisioned that Grief would fall into the genre of film noir. So I wanted to look at how Blade Runner was able to create a captivating environment using careful mixture of dialogue, music and sound. Obviously we won't have the luxury of Vangelis, but we could still use some form of effect on the dialogue or the diegetic sounds to help enhance the feel of the film. Reverb won't work, as our story is more intimate, and so we'd almost want to close in on the sound. Maybe focus on the little sounds and articulate the textures, such as when Morton slides his hand up Eve's stocking, or the slosh of the liquid in the glass that Grierson drinks, maybe enhancing the sound of the ice clinking. All of these sounds would help put the audience into that scene. The visual combined with the audio would create a powerful connection, whereby the viewer could almost taste that drink in Grierson's hand, or feel the soft texture of Eve's stocking, thus making the reveal all the more shocking. As to the music, well, our composer for Child of Alakea, Beth Bridgman, has agreed to write the score, although as to the style she may employ, I cannot answer that yet, as the film is still in its early processes. But I would suggest that, like Alakea, each character has their own theme that can be merged and or distorted as the story demands, such as Morton. All in all, I feel that this research I've done into both sound theory and its history has highlighted how important and influential sound is for a successful movie. I look forward to incorporating this into Grief. Okay, so this is a bit of BTS, and this is to show you my setup. What I've used is a Rode microphone with my own little buffer just to protect the sound and to take away any of the popping noise. We have a microphone stand and obviously the H6 Zoom recorder. Now obviously when I record this I have it in the third channel and I'm ensuring that my volume doesn't go above -12. Sorry, it doesn't go above -6 but doesn't go below -12, and that way I can ensure that I've got an even sound that I can then play with when I work on the edit of the actual video essay. Anyway, so that's how I recorded the audio for this essay. I don't think there's any much more I can talk about, really. Thank you.